This she-wolf was already nearing the end of her life. Though seriously wounded, she still stubbornly crawled forward through the snow. Her body was pushed to the limit, and only when she reached the mouth of a cave did she collapse. The wolf pup inside sensed its mother's arrival. It ran out happily to greet her, only to find its mother lying on the ground, breathing faintly. The she-wolf gazed at her pup with tears in her eyes, and finally, with great reluctance, she closed her eyes. Being able to see her child one last time before death was enough for her. The little wolf, who had never experienced life and death, thought its mother was only sleeping. It kept licking her body, but the mother gave no response like she usually did. Confused, the pup could only curl up in her arms as it had always done. Soon, snowflakes began to fall from the sky. The pup was awakened by the freezing north wind, while the mother still lay motionless, her body slowly covered by a thick blanket of snow. The little wolf had to accept the fact that its mother was gone, and it howled toward the sky in grief. Still so young, it had lost its mother's care and did not know how to survive in the cold forest. At that moment, the cries of a strange wolf pack came from afar. The pup looked around curiously, then gathered courage and ran toward the sound. Reaching a hillside, it saw a wild wolf that looked just like its mother, and beside her a few other wolves were playing with each other. The lonely pup looked on with envy and longing. It wanted to seek shelter, but was afraid of being rejected. While it hesitated, the pack ran off into the distance, and with no time left to doubt, the pup stumbled through the snow in a desperate chase. But its speed was no match for the adult wolves, and it could only watch helplessly as the pack disappeared from sight. Snowflakes fell once again in the forest, and the hungry pup chewed on the snow to ease its hunger, but then slipped and tumbled all the way down a slope, falling heavily into an ice cave. Faced with the strange new surroundings, it was lost and confused, wandering aimlessly. After stumbling its way out of the ice cave, it reached the riverbank wanting to drink water, but its legs were short and its body too small. No matter how it tried, it could not reach the water. At that moment, across the river, Jack happened to see it, and mischievously whistled at the pup. Never having seen a human, the pup trembled in fear and ran away quickly. As it kept running, it came to another stream, and on the riverbank several large fish had been stranded, which thrilled the pup. It cautiously moved closer, thinking about where to bite first, but suddenly a fish jumped up and slapped it with a huge tail, scaring the pup into not daring to move. Such a rare feast was right in front of it, yet it could not eat. The pup whined anxiously, thinking how wonderful it would be if its mother were here. Embarrassed, it could only drink a few sips of river water to ease its hunger, then unwillingly left. Back in the forest, it searched again for food, and luckily discovered a few mice basking in the sun. It chased with all its strength, believing it could surely catch such small prey, but the mice darted quickly into their hole. The pup clawed furiously at the ground, but the hole was too small and too deep. It could not reach them, and once again, it would go hungry. It feels deeply frustrated, regretting how it spent its time playing instead of learning to hunt properly. Starving, the pup gnawed on nearby branches, but a wolf that lives on meat could not survive on twigs, so it had to keep searching for food. Not far ahead, it was delighted to find a rabbit hanging from a branch. It rushed excitedly beneath the rabbit, but it was hung too high, and no matter how hard it jumped, it could not reach. Hunger pushed it to keep trying from different angles, but then it stepped into a trap and was hoisted upside down by a rope. The pup cried and struggled desperately, but it was useless. Hearing the sound, Chief Gray Beaver arrived. The pup, who had never seen a human, tucked its legs in fear and hardly dared to breathe. Gray Beaver lifted it by the scruff and examined it carefully, opening its mouth to look, and realized it was a wolf dog, naturally the best kind of working animal, and he gave it the name White Fang. Then he placed it on the sled and brought it back to the tribe. Soon, he began to train White Fang, determined to make it the best working dog in the world. In the blink of an eye, White Fang had grown and was able to swim skillfully in the river to catch fish. One day, 2 gold prospectors came to the tribe, and perhaps it was fate. For the moment Jack first saw White Fang, he felt a special connection. When no one was watching, he tried to reach out and touch him, but White Fang gave a warning growl. Gray Beaver hurried over to stop him, and Jack quickly explained he only wanted to pet him. But Gray Beaver said White Fang was only a working dog. He only needed to work. Yet deep inside, White Fang felt he did not belong here. and at night he would often walk alone to the river, staring into the distance in thought. Though he had enough food and drink in the tribe, wolves were pack animals, and the dogs did not like him, which left him deeply saddened, and he could only howl at the moon to ease his loneliness. One day Jack was out walking and happened to meet White Fang. Their eyes met, but before Jack could get closer, White Fang turned and ran away. Jack chased after him and looked everywhere but found nothing. Suddenly a grizzly bear appeared behind Jack, scaring him into retreating again and again. Then he turned and ran, and the starving bear charged after him without hesitation. In a panic, Jack saw a pile of logs ahead, and he quickly squeezed himself through a gap. The grizzly tried again and again outside, then thrust a paw inside and suddenly grabbed Jack's arm. He struggled desperately to break free, and staring at the enormous beast before him, Jack was filled with terror and helplessness. Just then, White Fang appeared behind the grizzly. Hearing the sound, the bear turned its head, rose up tall, and roared at White Fang, frightening him into backing away and turning to run. But this was only a trick to lure the bear away, and White Fang suddenly darted in front of the log pile. Realizing he had been tricked, the grizzly grew furious and slammed its paw against the ground in anger. Facing an enemy more than 10 times his size, White Fang showed no fear, baring his sharp fangs to display his ferocity. Provoked, the grizzly stood tall again, unleashing a deafening roar. Inside the log pile, Jack was deeply worried, but White Fang was not frightened at all. Seeing this, the bear's heart filled with frustration and defeat, and it was shocked and even awed by White Fang's fierceness, finally turning away in reluctance. Jack's life was spared, and White Fang ran away immediately after seeing that he was safe. Sometime later, Jack was preparing to leave the tribe, and before he left, he saw White Fang standing alone by the river, gazing into the distance. To thank White Fang for saving his life, Jack gave him a large piece of jerky and said,
"I won't forget you."
But White Fang showed no reaction, only glanced at him and then looked away again. Jack had no choice but to leave by boat in disappointment. But as soon as the boat departed, Jack saw White Fang standing high on a slope, watching him from afar. At that moment, White Fang's heart felt something different toward Jack. For the first time, someone had shown him such care and kindness, and he realized this was a rare and precious bond. One day, Gray Beaver took White Fang into town to trade furs, and there Smith, leader of the dogfighters, spotted White Fang and immediately came up with a cruel idea. While White Fang was waiting outside alone, they released a vicious dog to attack him, but White Fang was not to be messed with, and with a single move, he sent it rolling on the ground. The vicious dog tries to escape, but White Fang clamps down firmly on its tail. Fearing for its life, the dog rolled onto its back and exposed its belly in surrender. But the thugs grew even more excited, insisting they had to capture this wolf, and they surrounded White Fang with sticks. Luckily, Gray Beaver arrived in time and calmed White Fang with hand gestures. At that moment, Smith demanded that Gray Beaver compensate him for his injured dog. So Gray Beaver reluctantly gave him a fine fur, but Smith's greed was boundless, and he directly demanded Gray Beaver hand over White Fang, or else he would send him to jail. Unable to resist the local power, Gray Beaver had no choice but to agree. Soon after, Smith took White Fang into the wild and trained him harshly with sticks and cloth strips. Seeing the tools broken into pieces, Smith believed White Fang was fully prepared, so he brought him to the dog-fighting pit. The excited crowd unsettled White Fang, and the chain on his neck kept him circling in place. His opponent rushed forward, and though White Fang kept dodging, not wanting to harm another dog, the fighter dog would not let up. Experienced and merciless, the fighter pressed harder, and White Fang was forced to fight back, and with just one bite, the black dog was thrown down. Looking at the unmoving black dog, White Fang felt uneasy. But Smith cared nothing about that, only about the pile of money he had just won. And without giving White Fang any rest, he sent him into another match. From then on, White Fang became Smith's money-making tool, thrown into one brutal match after another. And for the sake of survival, he abandoned his kindness and turned into a ruthless fighting machine. Even so, Smith treated White Fang terribly, locking him in a cramped cage every day, feeding him only bare bones without meat, trying to keep his rage alive. One day, White Fang was sent to fight again, and his opponent was a small bull terrier that nearly took his life. At first, White Fang handled it easily. Its weight posed no threat. But White Fang underestimated it. This dog was trained to kill, and once it locked onto the throat, it would never let go until its prey was finished. White Fang was pinned down, the terrier's teeth deep in his neck, and he was on the edge of death. Seeing this, Smith flew into a rage, lashing White Fang with his cane. But then someone yanked Smith to the ground, pressing a gun to his chest. A man jumped into the fighting ring, pried the terrier's jaws open with an iron bar, and lifted White Fang into his arms to take him away. Back at his home, the man carefully bandaged White Fang's wounds, saving his life. The one who rescued him was Jack. White Fang gazed calmly at the old friend he had not seen in so long. Jack also saw the change in White Fang, and he sat there worried, not understanding why White Fang had fallen into becoming a fighting dog. The next day, Jack and Alex carried White Fang back to the mining camp so Jack could care for him closely. But White Fang showed no gratitude, ignoring the food Jack prepared and refusing his touch. He had been hurt too deeply by humans. Every master had only treated him as a beast and never as a partner, and he could no longer trust people. Sometime later, White Fang's wounds healed, and he tried to escape, but the chain held him fast, tangling around a chair. Jack cautiously approached to free the chain, but the wary White Fang bit his hand. Jack quickly pressed the wound to stop the bleeding, enduring the pain as he spoke to White Fang.
I know you don't want to hurt me, but you're right. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have tried to force you.
White Fang watched closely as Jack left the room, and only then did he relax a little. Jack did not give up. He firmly believed that as long as he showed his true heart to White Fang, he would definitely return to what he once was. This time Jack changed his method. He sat on a tree stump and then tossed the jerky to White Fang from a distance. Watching him eat, Jack slowly shortened the distance each time he threw the jerky, fully showing his friendliness. Then Jack took the bold step of placing the jerky in the palm of his hand. Although still hesitant, White Fang chose to trust Jack and ate the jerky. This thrilled Jack, and he carefully stretched out his other hand, gently reaching toward White Fang's head. Feeling the warmth of Jack's palm, he experienced human care for the first time, and for White Fang this was both a release and a rebirth. As time passed, White Fang and Jack grew closer, to the point where Jack even put his hand into White Fang's mouth without any worry that he would bite him. They ran together through the forest, they played happily by the river, and White Fang even helped Jack carry soil. With White Fang's help, his gold mining business flourished. One day, Jack and White Fang went into the mine as usual, but not long after entering, the tunnel collapsed. Alex rushed inside to rescue them, finding the mine sealed by earth with Jack's condition inside unknown. White Fang dug furiously with his paws, and Alex quickly joined to help. Soon, White Fang found Jack. Escaping death, Jack sat weakly at the entrance, with White Fang and Alex watching him in concern. At that moment, Alex noticed something. He bent down to examine White Fang's paw, and his fear instantly turned into joy. The two of them and the wolf rushed back into the collapsed mine, discovering dazzling veins of gold on the stone wall. It turned out that while saving Jack, White Fang had accidentally unearthed the soil covering the gold. They mined all the gold, and Jack gratefully stroked White Fang. He and Alex then went into town to sell the gold, but after great joy came great trouble. Early that morning, while everyone was still lost in dreams, White Fang suddenly raised his ears in alert. Next, sounds came from the roof, and Alex, awakened, grabbed a gun to go outside, but was forced back inside by a shot. They realized something was wrong and quickly crouched down to hide. It was Smith, who still resented them for interfering, and he and his men had ambushed outside to make Jack and Alex pay. They blocked the only vent and kept firing into the house, but when Jack and Alex did not come out, they set the house on fire, even throwing torches inside. As the flames grew and smoke poured out, they charged. Tinker kicked the door open, only to be knocked down by White Fang lunging out. And in the chaos, Luke was shot in the foot. Seeing White Fang charging through flames unharmed, Smith fired angrily, but not a single bullet touched his fur. White Fang spotted Smith and charged at him with a roar. Smith tried to shoot, but White Fang was already upon him, knocking him to the ground with one leap. Smith reached for his gun, but White Fang would not allow it, clamping down on his hip. Under White Fang's fierce assault, Smith had nowhere to escape. In the end, Smith and his men were captured by Jack and Alex and handed over to the police. Sometime later, after striking gold, Jack prepared to return to New York, but Alex reminded him that White Fang did not belong in a city. He needed freedom and the wilderness. Jack stayed silent. White Fang simply rested his head against Jack's leg, and in that moment, man and wolf shared a bond no one else could break. Later they went to the river together, leaning closely against each other as if the whole world held only them. After a long time, Jack stood up, sighed deeply, and took White Fang to the open fields, where he untied the rope binding him. "Take care of yourself," Jack said, then kissed White Fang on the forehead, hugged him tightly, and finally waved for him to return to the forest. But White Fang did not leave. Instead, he followed Jack closely. Jack's voice cracked as he shouted angrily, but White Fang still refused to go. No matter how Jack tried to drive him away, he kept following, until Jack raised a stick in threat, and only then did White Fang run into the forest. Watching him disappear, Jack felt as if he had lost something precious, and he ran desperately to suppress the sorrow in his heart. Days later, Jack packed his luggage, ready to board a ship, but at the last moment, he could not take that step.
I can't leave.
Finally speaking his decision, Jack felt a great weight lifted from his heart. Alex looked into Jack's eyes, understood his resolve, and smiled as he said goodbye. Jack walked back along the road with ease, returning to the mining site to rebuild the burned house. As he worked, he felt something, and when he looked up, White Fang was standing not far away, watching him. The man and the wolf rushed joyfully toward each other, embracing tightly. Mutual devotion is the rarest bond of all.